Hi there, welcome everybody. Come on in, we're going to give everyone a few minutes to log in before we get started. Feel free to make yourselves at home. As you will. Welcome, welcome. We will get started in about, let's give it 1 minute. People are popping in. Have a lot of fun tonight. You may notice that I am not Jed Appleruth. I am John Cadenhead. Jed is not feeling well today. He's pretty sick, so I will be hanging out with you guys, but it's going to be okay. We're still going to have a lot of fun. I will probably say that sentence at least one more time as I wait for more people to log in. But feel free to come on in and take a seat back and relax, because we're going to have a lot of fun talking about executive functioning and how to help students with it, but also try to keep it nice and peaceful as we talk about it. So wait a little bit longer and then we'll get started. All right, we've got a short quiz for you guys to start off. Just a couple of questions to get to know you a little bit, make sure that we are there for you and answering your questions effectively. So it should be popping up on your screen right now. Please take a sec to answer it, and then we'll get started. I'm going to cough real quick. Excuse me. Nope, didn't mean to do that. All right, thank you all so much. Again, welcome. My name is John Cadenhead. I am not Jed Appleruth, but Jed was normally going to be doing this presentation, but he is very sick today, so I am stepping in. I am the Senior Director of Tutor Services here at Appleruth, and I work regularly with students with executive functioning, and I train our executive functioning coaches here at Appleruth. So I have an fair amount of things to say about executive functioning and how to help students with it. So hopefully I can be an okay replacement for you all tonight. As we go through this presentation, please feel free to throw anything into the question and answer box. I believe the chat is disabled, but the question and answer box, I'll see it as I go. I'm happy to answer questions as I go, and I'll also make sure I answer all questions by the end. So don't hesitate to throw some questions in there. It's a small group tonight, so also feel free to throw out any sort of thoughts you have, because I want to make sure I can answer any personal questions or thoughts that you have that you may be struggling with your students or students that you work with in any capacity. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about executive functioning. So executive functioning is a fun term that is pretty popular now out there in the world, and let's make sure we define it and fully understand exactly what it is before we dive into how do I help a student with it. So our executive functions are the cognitive processes that that run through our brain and make choices for our brain that come out of the prefrontal cortex of our brain and help us decide on behavior functions, resource management, and dealing with any sort of goals and organization and planning ahead in that sort of process. They are skills and they're things that develop over time, and they're things develop over people as they grow and mature. So one thing that I always think is really interesting, and I point this out to families when I'm working with them and talking with them, is that our prefrontal cortex, that part of our brain up here that makes these decisions and helps us plan ahead, is one of the slower parts of our brains to develop, and it will fully develop and will finish developing around your mid-20s. So when we're working with students in middle school and high school, and we're frustrated that they haven't gotten down their full executive functioning processing in different ways, well, they're still growing into it. And recognizing that can be helpful. Like they aren't to the point where they can think that far in advance. They can't make decisions in the same way. All those pieces can be a little more challenging, and it should be expected. It's a normal place for them to be. So let's look at some of the examples of executive functioning, right? So planning ahead, thinking about what are the things that you need to be doing, not just for tomorrow, but for next week and next month, and how do I make sure that I finish this year strong, and how do I make sure I'm thinking ahead towards next year and what that looks like in school, how to prioritize and plan and make sure that, I'm putting the right emphasis on the right things, how to organize my life, my desk, my homework, my notes, everything like that, how to make a goal and actually follow through on it, how to manage your time, how to self-regulate and not be distracted by social media all the time, how to self-monitor and recognize what's working and what's not, and then inhibition and being able to make choices and being able to say and step back and say, like, that's not the right thing to do at this moment. I don't really need a whole plate of brownies or whatever it is, right? So all those pieces are part of the executive functioning processing. And with that, since we said, like, already, they are skills that all have their own levels of balance, right? So if we have the like baseball playing cards of our stats will look different, right? Some people have better planning, some people have better prioritization and whatnot. So knowing where you or your student or whoever we're talking about falls on these can be really helpful towards thinking about where do we put our energy to help, coach or support places that are harder for us. So myself, one of my biggest struggles is my ability to switch between one task to another. It takes me more time and more focus and more energy for me to make it like a switch from doing one project to doing another project. But my ability to plan ahead is a lot higher, and I'm very good at thinking long term for things. Is just switching between projects in that time period is a tougher thing for me. And so being able to self-regulate or self-recognize in those processes can help out a whole lot. So another way to look at the framework, we've got response inhibition, so your impulse control, your working memory, so how you're using the tasks in your head in the moment. Emotional control, like we talked about with inhibition, your ability to manage those emotions. Your flexibility, your ability to change plans, change what you're doing based on anything unexpected that comes into your life. Your ability to sustain attention. Can you sit here for my fun 45-minute presentation? Those sort of things. And then your ability to initiate a task, to move forward, to make a decision of like, I know that I need to do this thing, but can I actually start up the process of it? And then more advanced versions of these, your ability to plan long-term, your ability to prioritize, your ability to organize, your ability to manage time with your tasks, your goal-directed persistence. And then my favorite word, your metacognition. So your ability to step back and look at the process that you're doing to say, is it working or is it not? All these things are higher EF skills as you're thinking about, can my student not just get through today, but get through a longer period of time? And what does that look like to help him or her follow through on that? So as you can probably imagine, developing these skills will help in school, but they'll also help in life, right? Thinking about in a job or just in a relationship or in taking care of yourself. I've got a couple of students who are finishing up senior year right now, and their parents are worried about what does it look like when they go to college and I'm not there to be with them? How do I make sure that they can actually function and get to class and not just fall apart? And so thinking through, like, how do we cultivate and develop these executive functioning processing, not just in your schoolwork that you're finishing up right now, but in a longer term processing. And so I think the point down here at the bottom, EF skills are highly transferable in generalized to most areas of life. I think that's important. So recognizing now that we're terming out executive functioning skills, but the next step is to talk about how do we help them, right? So recognizing as we talk about how to help them, how to use them, not just in the school classroom, not just in one specific school classroom, not just in school in general, but in life in different ways. Like, how can we reuse the system in another process? And adults, as you guys are looking at this too, you may be saying like, oh, I was a little bit better at these sort of categories. These are helpful for anyone, no matter what their age. So, I mean, we kind of hit these points already, right? These are the different pieces of executive functioning you'll be thinking about. Your ability to manage your time, the ability to use different strategies for different needs, your motivation for things, etc. So we're going to dive deeper into these concepts as we go. And like I said a minute ago, it's tied closely to the idea of metacognitive processing. So your ability to look back at what your process is and to think about what's working, what's not, understanding how we learn more effectively, and changing the way you decide to study or process or look at information to be more successful towards your process of learning, right? And so I am a very visual learner. I am much better at learning information if it has some sort of image that goes with it or It's like geometry is very easy for me because of the imagery, whereas other people, geometry can be really tough, but I feel very comfortable in a place where I can deal with geometry. But if I'm learning a lot of facts and stuff like that, I learn it more effectively if I can tie it to visual imagery, either already drawn or in my head, right? And so knowing what is the process that helps you learn more effectively. And then where is it struggle as well? So like we're saying, self-awareness is a big piece of the puzzle. Students who know what they're good at are much better off than those who only know everything they're bad at, which is a nice quote from Judy Bass. So starting to learn what are my strengths and also where are my challenges so that we can support and best back up our challenges. So it's that step of self-reflection. And if I did a webinar a couple of days ago, I don't know if people attended that as well, but I talked a lot directly about students' process of when they're actually in the process of studying for a class, how do you take a step back after doing some studying and saying what worked, what didn't, what should I be doing differently? It's the same sort of process of being able to stop and say, what worked here? What did I not like? How do I learn from this? How do I do this differently as I dive into it next time? I actually have to myself a note over here beside my computer screen that has a similar sort of thought process, a little mantra for me. So after meetings, after tutoring sessions, after executive function coaching, I can look at it and say like, well, let's self-reflect for a minute. What worked for me here? What do I feel proud of? What was a good success moment? And also, what can I do differently? How could I have done that better? Because I think that no matter what scenario you're in, whether it be in school itself or being a parent or being, in the professional world, being able to stop and self-reflect can really help the growth that we want from executive functioning. So similarly, reframing failures or setbacks through the lens of curiosity and inquiry. Failure is going to happen and it's okay. It's normal for that to happen. But if we don't learn from our mistakes, if we continue to make the same mistakes, then we have a problem. So this is a nice idea, the chunk, chew, check method. It's a nice little noise to help us remember the connections between them all. So chunk, chew, check. So if you try to do too much without chewing and checking, then we're not going to process as much. So what does that mean? So for every 10 minutes you do something new, you're chunking in some processing. You need a little bit of time to stop back and reflect. And so the chewing is chew on the idea. So mull it over a little bit, reflect back on it, check your work, and then dive in and reprocess again. So building in that chew time to your studying, to your application of everything is a big piece of the puzzle. So one of the things that I think is important in recognizing how to study is thinking about studying in groupings, right? So you've potentially heard of like the Pomodoro Technique, where you study for like 25-30 minutes and then you get a little moment of time away from it. There's a middle period between those two, right? So we're studying for 25 minutes. We take 2 minutes to reflect and check what worked on it, what didn't, and then we get a nice 10-minute break or so, and then we repeat our process, move on to a new thing to study. Gives us the opportunity to change what we're doing to make it better and more effective. We learn from reflecting on experience. Yes, I think that's a fair quote. So how do we teach students to be more adaptable? So like we're saying up here on the screen, students learn to be more flexible in certain moments, but often the struggle happens. And the reason when I'm sitting down with students as an executive functioning coach, that I see a struggle is that they found a way to be successful in math class last year, but it's not successful here. And they can't figure out why there's a problem and a difference. And so being able to reflect that we have a different teacher, we have a different expectation, we have a higher grade level, we have new content that's not the same feel for you, and figuring out how do we reflect on what's different and how do we adapt and change our methods and our model to become better at it. And the other thing to reflect on it is that if you've got a student with who struggles with executive functioning, they often present as unmotivated, like they just don't care. But it's not that they don't care, it's often that they don't have the method to move forward in the process. So here's a silly metaphor for you guys that can kind of help. So imagine you're walking in the woods and you come across a pretty large river. You know that you need to get to the other side of the river, uh, but there's no bridge or anything to do to easily get across the river. How are you going to get across the river? It's a very open-ended question. There's a lot of answers you're running through your head of like, are there any rocks that I could climb on? Can I look around to see if it's like shallower in areas? Are there any like logs or anything I could push in the river to help me? What can I use to help sort of build a bridge or a boat or some sort of, action to get across the river? There's lots of different choices there, and it really depends sort of on what the scenario is, but there's no obvious, like, this is what you do. And I think that is a good metaphor for students who struggle in executive functioning in different specific places. Is they don't have, it's not that they don't want to get across the river, it's that they don't know how to build the boat that we need in this particular case, right? They don't know what the best option is, and sometimes they're stuck trying to decide between multiple options, and sometimes they just don't even know, like, if the choice is we need to build a boat, how many of you guys can build a boat with just your hands? Not many people, right? And we got to figure out how to like knock a tree down and tie some logs together in a way that we can get across that river effectively. And maybe they'll get across that river, but it'll take a lot longer than it potentially would have taken for you, and the process isn't as smooth as it would be for you. But what they need really is someone who can show them that, hey, this is a way you can do it. Have you thought about this way? Here's how it works. Let's practice it together, in this bad metaphor of crossing the river. So giving the kids some strategies, helping them see that success, and then their motivation returns and they want to move forward on it and they want to try better. So executive function coaching moves beyond and past that feeling of shame. So often students who are struggling academically, socially, however, have feelings of being less than, feel like they've been labeled, are internalizing negativity. So they may have trouble regulating those emotions. They may be very critical on themselves. They may be lagging in skills. They may just have turned to that very fixed mindset of, I must be bad at this, so I'm just going to give up type mentality. And so recognizing that they probably have some shame and some guilt and some self-reflection that's negative that we need to help recognize and not make them feel even more guilty for. The other half of it is recognizing that often students with executive functioning needs will have other things that will, how do I want to say this effectively, impair and get in the way of them, or potentially are seen, let's say it like this, they're seen outside of the context of executive functioning. They're seen more of like falling back on that same idea of like they're unmotivated, of like they're distracted, stuff like that. And so often students with ADHD can struggle with executive functioning because the focus is challenging for them. So you may see that they fidget and wiggle in their seats a lot. They may play with stuff on their desk or just with their pen, or draw a lot on their pictures. They may struggle in different ways, as you see on the screen, with like visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, processing in those sort of ways as well. And so recognizing that that's not necessarily that they aren't motivated to be there, but that's them trying to process around the fact that this is tough and it's hard to focus. So needing something to help them refocus. So how do we help? The first step is that we have to show a relationship. We have to show a care. And that's when I'm coaching executive functioning coaches. What I talk to them about is the most important part is helping the students see that you're not just another parent. No offense to parents, I'm a parent myself, but often the seat of a parent is also the seat of like the person who's going to push them to be better, and is frustrated with them. And often when students are coming into executive functioning coaching, it's because they've tried other things first and it's not working. And so there's a frustration and a head-to-head moment with the student and the parent. And so having the coach come in as a mentor and as a person who cares about the student and puts the student first, and shows supportiveness for the student, even in the moments of failure and struggle, is important. So how do we put the relationship first? Dr. Sharon Saline has these nice 5 C's that help us sort of remember these are the pieces of the puzzle. So self-control, compassion, collaboration, consistency, and celebration. If we can focus on those when we're working with students and talking with students, they really help a whole lot to get us all on the same page, working together, and show that it's not a us against them moment, but we're side by side in support. Right. And so consistency in that relationship, that we're regularly there for them. celebration on successes, no matter how small the success is, but seeing that success leads to good things can really help someone want that success more. Collaboration, that, like we said earlier with the bad river crossing metaphor of like working together to learn different ways, learn better skills to get towards things, and compassion for them with the struggle, being empathetic for them and supporting them. The self-control of helping, be there with them in that capacity too. Right. So, I mean, this point kind of gets that point across even more. We are collaborating, we're working together, we're learning how to problem solve as a team. So we're modeling to the students how to solve problems, how to prioritize, how to be proactive instead of reactive. One of the things that you as parents can do really well, and as teachers and educators, is to verbally explain your process of prioritizing, of being proactive about things, and in your life out loud in front of your students. So when my wife and I are in front of our son, we often talk about like, we're thinking forward about what my son's 7, so thinking in terms of like, a first grader, a 7-year-old, of like thinking ahead of like, what foods do we need for the week, and why are we making a grocery list now on Sunday before the week starts, and the making choices like that, thinking towards the weekend and what our plans are for the weekend. All those pieces of like looking ahead and learning how to prioritize it like that. My wife and I could do that, not in front of our son. I could sit down and figure it all out myself, but talking about it out loud helps him see that, this is a process that everyone needs to go through, and this is how the process works. So we're modeling the right prioritization and proactiveness in front of them in those capacities. Skill building is the key. And so this point up here, the first one, I think is a really important piece of it, right? And this is a nice piece of the puzzle too, like going back to the grocery list, right? Often the conversation with my son is, what would you like for lunches at school? What would you like for dinners? The answer is often just pizza, which isn't super helpful, but being able to help him be involved in it and help him make the first choice. If we think towards like a middle school or high school student or college student, when we hit a heavier problem, a more important problem, that we need to make a solution for, like, you as an educator or a parent probably see what the solution should be, and we could probably just give them that solution, just say it out loud to them, but that doesn't give them the chance to try out the thought process of what my options are, what should I do, but allowing them a safe space to try out an idea, to give a thought of what they should do, and then helping them work through that thought process together. It may not be the most perfect solution, but the fact that they came up with that skill, or that idea, and they worked to solve that idea, I think is important, right? And so when I'm working with students in executive function like sessions with them, like, and I'll ask them like, what do you want to do to make sure you get this paper done right? Like, let's lay out a plan of action to get through all the steps of it. It may not be the perfect plan, but we'll talk through like, do you feel comfortable with this? How do we reflect on it as it's running to make sure that it's running smoothly? And then how do we take a step back to edit them if it's not? But I won't say to them, oh, I don't think I think that this actually would be better if you did it slightly this way. I let them have the ownership of it, because having that ownership is going to really be helpful for them to move forward past that and get more comfortable with it in the future. And if they are just told, oh, that's a terrible plan, every time they come up with a plan, they're going to stop coming up with plans. But if they try a plan, and then we step back afterwards and reflect on it, and we talk about the successes, even if it didn't work perfectly, then we have the opportunity to talk about how do we make it even better next time, which is a much more comfortable and happy conversation for someone who, they ran 75% of what it could have been, but they learned how to make it 90% next time. That's a much better place for them to be than me just give them the 90% and they don't know why it is what it is, and they don't feel invested in the process of it. So here's a good couple of self-reflective moments, right? So talking about what's your goal, how do we start up this process, what are the strategies, the options of focus we need to have for this, what helped us reach our goal, how could we do it differently next time, and then in that process, what are the different strategies we could use? These are great questions. These are obviously not the only questions, but they're great little places to start that conversation post event, post process, to reflect on it and make it better next time. Another piece of that puzzle is talking about what is a win. And even if it's a small win, how do we recognize that win? I think that another piece of the puzzle is often when I'm working with a student in executive functioning processing and building skills for that, excuse me, they're coming to me because they've hit a wall for a while now. It's not, people often don't come for executive functioning processing when they're doing well. They come when they're not doing well. And so at that point, they're frustrated and their parents are frustrated and everyone's in a not great place about it. And so a small win, sometimes you won't even notice as a win because we're looking for getting to this success moment. I had a student who came to me once and was 121 assignments behind in school, which is a lot. And so the win really that everyone wants is to get to 0 assignments behind, right? And so being able to stop and reflect and say, you are now only 100 assignments behind. You've gotten through 21 assignments. Look at how much work that was that you did, that you found a place to put back in your life and stay on top of the new work that's coming in. Like that is an important win to have, but we're still behind. And so if everyone's still looking at the fact we're still behind, we're not going to be able to see that moment of growth. And having ownership of that moment of growth really helps the student to the next level of growth and to continue to move forward and be successful. Shifting ownership to the student, next piece. So before you approach goal setting or strategizing, discovering what is their motivation, what's going to get them to move forward, and having that buy-in is going to be important. So what goals are we serving? Are they the goals of the student or are they goals of the parent? And that's the first thing that I look for when I'm talking to a student, when I first take on a student for executive function coaching is how aligned are the parent goals and the student goals? Does the student have a goal? Does the student want to do better? Does the student see the struggle that they're having currently? And how similar are they to the parent's goals? And sometimes they're not at all, and sometimes they're pretty similar. And so starting to learn from a parent's point of view, what are my kids' point of views? What is my kid's point of view on this? Does my kid care about this? Does my kid just feel like they don't care, but really it's a problem of skill and they haven't developed that skill yet? And then how do we help move them forward in a way that doesn't, like we're saying down here, provide a negative future consequence, like too much punishment or too much reward just for trying or failing or whatnot can really cause negative future consequences. So we are not, here's good language for you guys. We're not fixing problems. We're not solving issues because that implies that the student is a problem or an issue. But really what we're doing is we're building rapport, we're building trust, we're building a safe place for the student to try something out, to talk through an idea and not feel judged from it, but also to find a way to feel comfortable talking through their own thoughts, which often they don't. So active listening to what they're talking about without giving advice, but being there in support, and then helping them think through the process in a way where they feel like someone's there for them and not just someone's there for giving them the answer. So before you dive into crafting a solution for your student, think about pausing, listening, empathizing, and connecting with them specifically. And then the other piece of the information that I think is important is recognizing that we will live in a world of discomfort, that as we sit down and start to build out our executive functioning processing, it's not that everything will be easier. There will be moments where things feel harder, but we grow when we walk outside of our comfort zone. There's a limit to everyone's tolerance before everything just falls apart. And we don't want to be there, but we want to be somewhere in between that comfort and tolerance moment, because that's where people learn and grow and learn how to not do something next time. If we only always win, it's really hard when we get our first failure. But if we learn how to fail as well as win, we're in a better place. So as they're looking at the setbacks and breakdowns, where did things go wrong? How do I identify the problem inside of what went wrong? And how do we feel responsible to see how to make a change in it without any feeling of shame or judgment, of just reflecting on the process itself? All right, understand the complexity of a simple task. So when your student with executive functioning processing is struggling, you may see a moment where it seems like a very simple task for you. You don't understand why this is hard for them, but the process of getting through this one task can feel just super overwhelming for them. It sometimes can come from, just like we talked about before, they don't see the steps the way you see the steps. And so moving to that first step can be really hard. It could be a world of, like we were talking about earlier, where we talked about shifting from one idea to another. It can be a harder process, or seeing how to move past the first step. We can see what we're supposed to do, but actually starting up that first step can be hard. And so talking through with the student in a very, like we talked about earlier, like calm and safe place where you're not judging them, but asking them and walking through each of the steps and figuring out, well, where actually is the problem happening? Like I was working with a student she was trying to build out a 5-page English paper. And the process of actually just starting the first couple of sentences was taking her more than a week to do every day. She's just sitting there staring at her screen, not being able to get through that process. And her parents were frustrated because they knew that that time frame was coming up where she had to have all 5 pages finished. She was feeling a bit overwhelmed from it. And so sitting down with her and figuring out, well, where is the moment of overwhelming happening, and how do we get past that moment of overwhelmingness? Right. And so then I was able to sit down and talk with her about, like, well, what is it? How do people who are writers get past that moment of getting the first words on a sentence? And that often comes from a place of, well, I'm just going to throw down a bunch of randomness, and I know I'm going to delete most of it, but let's just start throwing stuff on the screen. Or another method is like, let's copy and paste all our quotes that or little citations or thought processes that we have, or bullet points on there. So something is on the screen, because then we can start writing around it. But learning little methods like that instead of getting stuck in that one moment. When working with students in terms of keeping track of information, here's a good list of thought processes for that. We're not just thinking about what's your homework, which is too broad of a statement. We're talking about what are all the steps we need to do? Where do we keep our homework? What's the best place to be tracking it all? What are all the different subjects and the way to track them effectively? Right, making each step very clear. That's not the slide I was expecting it to be. Okay, we're sorry, my brain has to flip for a second. So students getting derailed and distracted as they're navigating, as they're moving forward in the day, being able to transition from one thing to another, pivoting in class, pivoting from home to school, and struggling with those transitions can be really difficult for a lot of students. And so being able to plan ahead and recognize where are the places that things get hard. I've got a student who always feels overwhelmed when she walks into her physics class. It just happens every time she goes into the physics class. And so learning how to process around that so that she can still be successful in physics class and take notes in effective ways without just having that sinking feeling that happens every time. So building through, how do we recognize these tasks and how do we follow through on all pieces of it, right? So the initiation side of it, like we were talking about with that paper, how do we start something through, the persistence of actually finishing that paper, and then the completion. So one of the things that's interesting about my student who had 121 assignments that she was behind in is that she actually had done most of them. Not unless she'd done like maybe 50% of them. She just never turned them in because she kept sitting on them thinking, I'm going to go back and look at them more and make them better. I don't want to turn them until they're perfect. And so instead of turning in like a B, something that would have gotten a B, she just never turned it in and got an F. And her thought process was, I'm just going to sit on it because maybe I can make it an A's worth of this paper or whatever it was. And you can probably in your head think about, well, that seems silly. You're going to get an F instead of a B. Let's just get that B and move on. But learning how to get through that completion moment was the tough stuff for her. So here we've hit this a little bit, right, of like planning out the steps that we need to do instead of looking big picture at like, I need to write a 5-page paper. What are all the steps we need to do for that? And how do we plan ahead for it? So like this bullet point of office hours are on Wednesday and the assignment is due Friday. Don't start that assignment Thursday because you may have questions and you may want to sit down and talk with your teacher in those office hours or Wednesday. So planning ahead for the potential problems that could be coming up. Imagining yourself in the future is the key to executive functioning. Where are you going to be? All right, moving on, creating smart systems. So organizing your thoughts, organizing your digital space and your physical space. As we're thinking about how do we stay organized effectively, we've got to think about all those pieces of the puzzle, right? So what does my physical space look like to keep it organized? What's my brain? How do I organize my systems, my habits, and my routines? So this is the slide I thought I was going to earlier, sorry. So homework, how do we track our homework and where do we track our homework? Is it on a paper? Is it a random script scratch paper that we carry around in our book bag and gets lost? Is it a little binder that we keep in our book bag, but we forget to pull it out and write our homework on it? Is it on our phone and we just take a picture of something, but then it gets lost in our assortment of pictures? Where do we track all that stuff? How do we manage it? How do we make sure that our backpack actually gets the homework home and doesn't get lost and everything is organized in it? How do we manage our inbox? And I'm sure this is a feeling that most of you guys have of like, oh my God, my inbox isn't always insane. There's so much stuff in it always. How do I learn to keep it clean so I can find the things I need? Right. So building the right systems for it. And everyone's systems are going to be different because we're all different. Our brains are different and we think in different ways, but finding the system that works and trying out different systems to see if they work. It takes time. It takes time to say like, that worked pretty well, but I wish I could do these things. So how do I, re-edit it to be more effective in that way? So being able to step back again metacognitively and look at processes and habits, what's successful and what's not, what's getting in the way of me being the best I can be, and potentially nudging effective habits and routines until they become automatic. It takes about 20 days or so of doing something regularly on purpose for you to do something regularly automatically. So committing to a process for about 20 days really helps you get to the point where it becomes the automatic of it. So next up, thinking about your physical space. Overstimulation, too much clutter is very distractible. Some students do better in more cluttered environments. Some students do better in more sparse environments. Really figuring out what's the right level of clutter. Do I need just my computer on my desk? Do I need a computer and some sort of fidget device on my desk? Like, what do I need to help myself refocus the most effectively I can? And everyone's got a slightly different piece of that, but it's playing around with it, right? It's probably not a lot of stuff on your desk, but what's the right stuff to get in the right place? So Marie Kondoing out your inbox, your desk, your study space, even your brain. How do we pare things down to what's the most essential things that we need? Can we unsubscribe to all these emails we're getting from colleges or whatnot? How do I minimize everything in my life? So building good, simple systems, making sure the system's visual and simple, often spelling out clearly the steps of the system and having them in a place where you can see them regularly until they become routine. Like we can spell out a system and then forget it tomorrow if we're not reflecting on it regularly, right? Labeling things out effectively, having fun, going crazy, making nice little labels on all the things that you need so they're easy to find and nice and organized. So finding the right tools for that process, right? So is it a physical planner? Is it a calendar? Are we going to use a Google Calendar? Are we going to use a personal like written calendar? Are we going to use a big a big printed out calendar on the wall? What's the best way for us to track the things that we need to be doing? And maybe it's both. Like I've got a nice visual over here, a big calendar of the month, so I can be thinking long term. But I also use my Google Calendar every week, and I actually like interspace out my projects that I need to be doing each week, right? So making sure that I'm actually spending the right time that I need on the different things I need, and I'm planning breaks in there because we're going to need it. And if I just expect to work nonstop through all that time, I'm going to get tired and my work's not going to be as good as it should. So another example of that, right? So scheduling in my study plan, where I'm going to be doing different things, how long things are going to take, so that I feel like I can actually conquer the stuff that I need to do. I was working with a student on this actual process because we're getting ready for finals that are right around the corner. Of like, what does this week look like? Where are we going to put our studying and how long is the studying going to be? How do we know that we were successful in that process? The organization of the backpack, that's always the fun part. But figuring out how to eliminate redundancies in that backpack, simplify what we need. We don't need 15 pins in different places in that backpack, but having the right setup, the right binder, the right folders, and then the place where they bring stuff home so it doesn't get lost. I think all that's going to be super important. And then it's the commitment, right? I think the other thing I'd say about that is it's really easy to do that with your son or daughter, set them up with the backpack plan, and then 3 days from now they've fallen apart on it again, right? but it's recognizing, reflecting on it with them, talking about, well, it didn't work this time. How are we going to do it better tomorrow? And then how do we get through those 20 or so days until it becomes the routine of that's how we do it. Also, I think manipulating your environment to make it easier to do the right choices. It's really easy to go hop on your phone if your phone's right next to you, but it's a lot harder to hop on your phone and check out social media if your phone is in the kitchen and you're in your study room, right? And so making you're setting up the right plan so that you can rely on less on your willpower and more on the environment that you set up for yourself. So, like we said, minimizing distractions, having a regular study area is important. I mentioned this a couple of days ago in my other presentation, but studying in a space that's designed for studying means that when your body sits down there, it's ready to study. But if you study in a place that's used for something else, your body's just intrinsically confused when you sit down of like, am I studying right now? Or I'm in my bed, should I be studying? Should I be sleeping? Your body's trying to react to which one am I choosing? And neither of those things work out well for you. And then using the right tools to help you focus. So whether it be put your phone on airplane mode or have specific music. Jeb really likes to chew gum while he writes a big paper or something like that. That's his focus process that he uses. Different people, different things, right? So finding the thing that works for you. And then organizing your digital environment too, right? So what's open? What do I have notifications up? How do I turn off the fact that I'm going to get text messages from my friends all day while I'm trying to work through my stuff, like turning off that stuff while you're working, putting things in airplane mode, those sort of options. Right. So knowing ahead of time, what are the things that are going to be distracting for me? And shifting so that you have something else that's less distractible, right? So if I know that if I go on Instagram, I'm going to be lost in there for 20 minutes, then I'm not going to use Instagram during my break time. I'm going to do something else like doodling or something like that. So that's still helpful and a break for me, but it's a different kind of break that won't eat up all my time. So like we said a minute ago, make what's hard easy and what's easy hard. How do we make it easiest for me to study and hardest for me to get distracted from studying? And then structuring in the right time for it, right? So knowing that we do need time away from it. It is not that we want our kids to sit down for 5 hours straight and study and not get any breaks. We want them to, they're going to learn best if they break, if they have other things that they're doing, if they can walk away from something and come back and reprocess it. All those things are important. So learning how to do that directly. And then setting those boundaries, right? The work and the play. All right, we're almost there. Thank you all so much. Let's finish it up. Self-regulation, self-care, and self-monitoring. So exercise. Everyone encourages their students to exercise more than they do, I imagine, for the most part, right? But recognizing that having that break from the cognitive work helps reset ourselves, and also the increased blood flow and the mental downtime helps us refocus as we move to the next task when we come back. Sleep, food, exercise, all those things are super important. The sleep that you get really affects your ability to focus. We all know that. But it's definitely true with students, and the right food and the right amount of the nice food triangle. All those things are important in terms of a student being able to make the right choices in the moment, to be able to put the right energy towards things. If you don't have the right food in your belly or sleep, then everything else is a lot harder because of it. We talked about the Pomodoro Technique a couple of times now, right? But taking those breaks, in those breaks, doing something different, not just sitting still in the same place that you were sitting when you're doing your work, but getting up, moving, stretching, doing something different so that your mind resets. And then positive self-talk. How do we turn our inner dialogue into a better place, right? That is really hard because you don't know what's happening in their brains. But the regular interactions that you have that are supportive, that are there for them without judging them, that are listening to them actively and caring, show them just through that interaction how the healthy self-talk should be, right? The more you demonstrate the right methods in front of a student, the better they will be at using those methods themselves because they've seen how they work. And then teaching them how to be okay, not by themselves, but by working with other people, right? So how do we form a study group? How do we email our teacher? That's my favorite thing to teach a student, is that the more you regularly converse with your teacher, the more that teacher cares about you and will help support you. And know that you want to learn. I have so many students who never actually had a one-on-one conversation with their teachers and are failing through those classes, and their teachers, haven't ever talked to that kid directly. So teaching that student how to go up to that teacher, say, I want to be better at this class. I know I'm not doing well. Here's the methods I'm using currently. How do I do them better? That question in itself, right? That conversation shows this teacher that you care, shows the teacher the methods that you're doing. It's not just you don't care at all, and asks for help in a way that the teacher has something concrete they can do to help you. And I've never had a teacher say, oh, too bad, you're on your own at that point, right? Finding a study partner, seeking out tutoring, searching the internet, using study guides, going to office hours, being a self-advocate in all those different ways. But being a partner and finding other people to help you through it. Learning effective advocacy. So like we said a minute ago, struggling with asking for help, identifying the right people who can help. And we can coach students on how to be effective help seekers and to turn them into their own self-advocates. Because as we're thinking about students in high school going into college, they have, they're going to have to be their own self-advocates even more. They're going to be on their own. We're not going to be right next to them. We're not going to be able to like call the school in the same way and ask for help. So teaching them how to do that themselves. So there we go. In summary, the high-level takeaways. Step number one is that relationship, building that relationship, showing the student that you are there for them, you empathize with them, that you care about them, and you'll support them no matter what, even through failure, and that you love them, and that you're there, you want to be a mentor and a coach and a cheerleader for them. Shifting the ownership to the students so they don't feel like you're just there to show them what to do. You're there to help show them different methods of what you should do, but you're there to support them through whatever ownership and whatever decision process they decide to do, right? And you'll help them through what worked and what didn't in a way that doesn't feel demanding or shameful, but supportive. Understanding the complexity of a simple task. So not getting frustrated at the fact that something that feels simple to you isn't simple to them, but being able to step back and look at each of these tasks that they're struggling with in a bigger picture and help them see different methods to be able to achieve that task, and being there to provide help where they ask for help and letting them know that you are there to do that, right? Helping build the right systems, the right ways to study. So talking with your student about the process they use currently, reflecting on different ways to do that more effectively, and letting them, again, have that ownership of what they end up doing at the end of the day, supporting them through that. And then teaching them self-regulation, self-care, and how to self-monitor. So that is our fun presentation. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I hope that was useful. Feel free to throw any questions that you have in there. We here at Alperuth want to make sure that your students are supported no matter what their needs are. We do a lot of executive functioning processing. So as we're finishing up this school year, I bet there's a couple of you guys who are like, oh, my students need some help. We can't work a miracle in the next month, but we can definitely sit down and help start to build out a better system for them, figure out how to get ready for finals in effective ways, and leading into the next school year, be in a place where they can hit the ground running, feel sure of themselves, feel better with the processes that they have so they can be successful. All right, well, thank you all so much. There's a couple of questions coming in. Awesome, thank you. Yes, this presentation is recorded. We will be sending those out tomorrow, I believe. So thank you so much. I appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with me tonight. I'll give it a minute to see if anyone's chatting a question. All right, well, thank you all so much. That is it. We will end it.